When I was a senior manager in the pharmaceutical industry, one of the improvement books that I used to recommend to all of my staff was called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by a guy called Stephen Covey. I don't know whether you've ever read that book. I can see you smiling, Bryan, so you probably read it. But it's a fantastic book, just in terms of personal development, but in terms of also developing leaders in the workplace. And it starts by asking you to think about yourself. I think he calls it private victory. Yeah, think about your own self before going out and reacting with the world and starting to behave in the world. And it gives 7 principles or habits that you should develop to be highly effective. And I think I became a much better leader in the workplace by applying a lot of the stuff that I read in the book. I really took it to heart. It spoke to me, and it works. And the book we're going to discuss today, I think, is a bit like that, except instead of having 7 principles, it has 11 principles. And instead of being about just things in general, it's about running. And I think, in another world, you could even, maybe it would have been called The 11 Habits of Highly Effective Runners. If you need the copyright for the title, if you want to change the title, feel free to use it. But it's actually called Make the Leap by Bryan Green. So hi, and welcome to Running Book Reviews podcast, where we review running books to help you decide if you'd like to read the book for yourself. We hope that listening to us chat about running will keep you motivated and interested about your own running and maybe inspire you to make an advancement or try something new. My name's Alan, and with my co-host Liz, we're going to talk today with author Bryan Green about his new book, Make the Leap.
So Make the Leap is a book aimed at helping you train your brain so that you can benefit from your training plan. It also makes you think about the things outside of your actual training plan that can help you with your performance. Bryan calls this the hidden training program. The book starts with chapter 1, What is a Leap?, where Bryan explains the idea that performance improvements are not linear. They're actually a leap that gets you to a new normal, and then the progress slows for a while until your body is ready for the next leap. The other chapters are grouped into 2 parts. The first part is attributes, beliefs, and values, and then the second part is effort and behavior. And the 2 parts cover 11 optimal training principles, each of which has a dedicated chapter. Bryan Green is the co-founder and COO of the Go Be More apparel and co-host of Go Be More podcast, where he's interviewed people like Meb Keflezighi. He has written for runnerstribe.com. He's a former Apple employee and learned both Italian and Japanese as an adult, which is very impressive. He's also a former UCLA runner and very accomplished. His list of PBs includes a sub 30-minute 10,000 meter and a 14:19 5,000 meter. And Bryan's teammates at UCLA included Olympians Meb Keflezighi and Abdirahman. So thank you for joining us, Bryan, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I just want to clarify one thing. Abdi was actually one of our competitors at a rival school, but Meb was my teammate. Mm-hmm. Abdi went to Arizona, but that was the era I was running. I was running competitively at UCLA from at the very end of the 90s until 2002.
And you're joining us from Japan, so I suppose we should say konnichiwa or ohayou gozaimasu.
That's right. Ohayou gozaimasu to you guys. I know it's more konnichiwa for you. Yeah, I am joining you from Japan. Isn't it amazing that we can do this over Zoom across the world and have a conversation that I could not have imagined, 20 years ago when maybe the genesis of this book was sort of forming.
Yeah, it really is amazing, and through time zones as well. So it's morning for you, but it's evening for us. So thanks for waking up early.
Oh, of course. I'm excited. I've enjoyed catching up on your guys' podcast. I think it's great that there's a podcast doing what your podcast is doing, because all of us who are writing running books, the best thing is to have resources out there who are happy to sort of talk about them and highlight them and, I don't know, explore them. So I'm glad that you guys found this niche and decided to fill it.
Yeah, we love running books. We used to, we would read books and then we would talk about them during the run. That's how the podcast was born. And so here we are today. And interviewing you for Make the Leap. So I guess the first question is, as always, what made you decide to write the book?
I decided to write the book because I had a very specific experience in university that really affected me. And that was that I was a good runner who was sort of on the team traveling. I was top 5 sometimes in my races for the team, but I was not really living up to my potential, I would say. And I started to see other athletes who I had been better than in high school. They were outperforming me in college. And at the time, my attitude about ability was that, well, we all have a certain amount of talent. So like I'm more talented than them because that's why I beat them in high school. And suddenly they were beating me in college. And that, that kind of affects your idea about talent. If suddenly they have more talent than you, that doesn't work. And around the same time, I started taking these classes in education theory, learning theory, psychology of learning, psychology of improvement. And I was really fascinated by this. And they had all of these frameworks and studies and research about how people learn and how different approaches to thinking about problems give better results. And I was, in theory, the professors wanted us to apply this to our school. And I just immediately applied it to running. I said, well, this is like what I'm more interested in is my times than my grades. So I started applying all these different thought processes and tweaking them for a running purpose. And over the course of the next, say, 6 months, I started to see amazing improvements in my running. And that got me more motivated to kind of double down on the approach. And I made a big leap. I became one of the top runners in the Pac-10, and I really raised my level dramatically over the course of what felt like a season, right? And that experience kind of changed the way I think about doing anything, about learning, about that's why I feel I was able to learn languages as an adult. It's why I've been able to do certain other things. It kind of unlocked an ability in my own mind to sort of reframe the challenge of learning and getting better at things. So I had that experience and I started thinking about how powerful it was for me. And I realized it was powerful. And then as I went on and I would read my own running books and I would read books on psychology, I would read these books, I would say to myself, the book that I would have needed as like a 20-year-old doesn't really exist. There's no book that has all of these ideas in it. And I kept sort of not writing the book and then waiting to see, I was like, well, somebody will write this book, right? I'm sure somebody will write this book. And after a long time, it was like, oh, there's other books out there, but there's nothing like the book that I would want to read. So I said, I've always wanted to write a book. I'm really passionate about these ideas, this topic, this thing. I think it could be really practical and applicable to a lot of people. So let's try and do it. And that's where that's the genesis of it is trying to take these core concepts that have helped me, not just in running, but in areas, and present them, hopefully in my mind, to younger runners in a way that it makes them realize some of the weaknesses that they might have sort of adopted unknowingly in how they think about training. And if they can fix some of those, I think it will help to unlock their ability to get more out of themselves when they're training and when they're competing.
You say younger runners, but I think, from my perspective, as a not a younger runner, that it can apply to anyone. I think it can apply to anyone in terms of whether you're a beginner and you're saying, well, what's this running thing? Or whether, in fact, you're a professional Olympic athlete and you're saying, where should I be looking to try and squeeze a little bit more to get that, get that silver into a gold medal. In fact, there's a smorgasbord which you lay out in terms of optimal training principles, where anybody can come to the buffet and sort of look around those 11 things and say, okay, well, once they've read the book, where is it that I could really, really fill a hole in my diet by choosing this from the buffet? And sometimes only when you've done something and you go back and you go, aha, that's probably why I was able to do that. You get an aha moment or an insight. Probably before we get into a lot of that, your book's called Make the Leap. You talk about thinking better, then training better, then running faster, and the idea to make a leap. Maybe you could just tell us, tell everybody what is a leap.
Sure, absolutely. Well, we use this kind of colloquially, at least in the US, especially when you talk about, basketball players or something. You'll say, oh, this season he made the leap. Like he's just playing at another level than he ever had in the past. And that transition seems sudden when you look at it from the outside, you're like, oh, well, he was, only scoring 10 points last year every game, and now he's scoring 20. He made a leap. And I think that concept is actually pretty common across a lot of different experiences. Sometimes some things just click, and all of a sudden you realize, oh, I was struggling to do this for a long time, and now all of a sudden it's easy, and I don't really know why, but I obviously crossed some threshold or some barrier that was holding me back. And the idea of the leap is, I want people to understand that actually that's normal. That making a leap is the normal way we improve. It, as kind of humans, we're sort of predisposed to just think about things linearly. Like every time I do a workout every day, it's like putting some coins in the jar. And at the end of the day, if I keep putting the same amount of coins in the jar, it just keeps increasing the same amount every day. But that's not actually how the real world works. The real world sort of, you have these tiny little improvements every day, and you don't really see much in the sense of improvement. And then you kind of get a big rush of improvement at once, where everything kind of comes together. And from an experience standpoint, you can spend a long time doing a lot of work and feeling like you're not getting anywhere. And then all of the sudden realize that now it's working, and boom, I've moved up another level. And if you don't kind of know that that's normal, that makes the hard work with no improvement period feel more stressful and frustrating. And then when you improve, it kind of messes with your head, because you make this big jump and you think to myself, oh, well, obviously it's what I've been doing recently that made me improve. And so if I just keep doing it, I'll keep improving. And then you don't improve. And then you're like, well, what's going on? This doesn't make any sense. And so I wanted to sort of frame that in a way, and try to explain that leaps are normal, but but also the end of a leap is not just leaping forever. Like it's a plateau again. And there's a process to how these things happen. And so that's kind of what the first chapter is. It's trying to explain how feedback loops and that concept, if you can understand it, it can help to unlock, in my mind, what the process looks like for training over a long period of time, with long, slow periods with very little improvement, short periods of big improvement, and repeated cycles that are going to get you as far as you're going to go.
It's actually kind of funny, because as you were talking, I was just thinking of my experience when I went back to university, because I had done like a professional degree. So I just went to like professional school, and I did nursing, and I decided to go back to university and do industrial engineering. And then what happened was I had to do all these math classes that I hadn't done before, because like my other program didn't require it, and this new program did. So it was basically the like, just I guess it depends where you are in the world. Here in Quebec, we have something called CEGEP, which is like just after high school, but before university. So it's like a 2-year. So usually you would have done Cal 1 and Cal 2. So Cal 1 was like derivatives. Cal 2 would be like integrals. And I remember doing derivatives at age 28 when I went back to school. And just like I went through the semester, and I was like, I'm going to go to every class. And if I fail this, well, it's just not meant to be. I went to every single class, and I would just bang my head against like these homework problems that I would just stare at for hours on end. And I just couldn't advance. And yet the assigned homework, which was never anything you handed in, would be like several problems, and I would be staring like for hours at one problem. And so we got to midterm, and I failed. Like I got, I think 50%. And I was like, okay, well, I think that this might not end well. But I kept going to class, I kept showing up, and I was like, I kept staring at those homework problems, and I just, and it didn't seem like anything was working. And finally, it was like right before the final exam. And luckily the final, they had this grading scheme where the final, if you got a good grade, it could override all of your other grades. And I had been up to now like getting like 50%, so pretty much failing the class. And all of a sudden I got, I don't know, like 90 something in my final exam. And and everything made sense. The questions just made sense. All of a sudden, it was like overnight, things just started to make sense. And then I think we had summer break, and I went, or we had a 2-week break in between semesters. And so now we were going to Cal 2, and Cal 2 was integrals, which was gonna be, again, the same problem, but I didn't know that at the time. But then when I was listening to the teacher explain derivatives, because they kind of recap the previous material that you should have learned that you're going to need to build on. All of a sudden, I'm like, well, of course, this makes total sense. And as he was doing the problem, I was like doing the problem on the side faster than he was doing it on the blackboard. And I was like, how is it that I understand this so well right now? And it makes so much sense. But yet, like, I was banging my head against the wall for, like a semester's 13 weeks. And I swear I was banging my head against the wall for like 10 of those weeks that I didn't understand anything. I would just sit in front of my homework and just stare at it. And I would have like 2 lines done after like 2 hours.
So what you were doing there, I guess, without knowing it, is putting it back into the context of the book, is building momentum.
Yeah, it's just so strange that it really happened like you just said with the leap.
I'm so glad this is an example that I haven't heard, which is because, you know, I like to, I'm confident that it applies anywhere that requires a long, like my book really works for any situation where you have to apply yourself with some sort of consistent effort over time in order to get results, right? Like there are probably certain things, like my book's not going to help you, I don't know, win the lottery. It's not going to help you understand US politics. It's not going to, there's certain things that don't, like, it does apply, right? But it's in something like learning math. It's one of those things that we sometimes think like, oh, well, like some people are good at math and some people aren't. And there's some truth to that. But on the other side, we can also spend 10 weeks struggling with math and then give up because we're like, well, it's never going to happen, right? I'm never going to understand this. And the reality is, that's not always true. Like the 10 weeks, you might be making these tiny little improvements in what you understand, but they're just not enough for you to feel like they're substantial, like they matter. Mm-hmm. But all those little improvements, it's not until they start to really come together that you can make the leap, or that it will click. There's different language we use for different subjects. I'll just recap really quickly. One of the things that really solidified for me that the framework that I have that I put in the book for how to think about improving and learning, why it works, is learning Japanese, because I had studied Spanish in high school and basically failed. I didn't fail because I copied my friend Caesar and I got a good enough grade to pass. And then I tried to study Greek in university, which I picked because I was a philosophy major. I thought that would be smart to study. And I almost failed that. And I literally had convinced myself that I'm just not good at languages. And I just associated talent, like, well, some people are good at languages and some people aren't. The reality was I wasn't studying hard. I wasn't applying myself in those languages. I had no process I wasn't following the best practices to learn a language. I was just taking a class and not caring about it. Right. And then assuming that I'm not good at it. And when I moved to Japan after university, I had a slightly different mindset, and I had a reason to commit to it because I was living here. And I just started working away at it with this attitude of sooner or later, it will come. I know that I can do it because it's not talent. It's just like, there are people who are not as smart as me who've done this. I can figure this out, that kind of thing. And after 6 months, I was like, I still don't understand what's going on in this country. It's a really hard language. But somewhere around 6 months, it just suddenly started to click, and I got to like the first level. It's like, okay, now I understand what's happening in these really simple conversations around me. And I doubled down, I kept studying. And then sometime later, it was like, oh, now I understand what's happening in the work meetings. And now, but it would be it followed the pattern that I experienced with running. It followed the pattern that I could see in some other areas. And like you're saying, it follows the pattern that you had with your math, where a long slog of very little improvement, and then suddenly a burst. And I would like to say that the good thing about something like running is that long slog is at least something that you can hopefully enjoy doing every day. Whereas, sometimes it's harder to study integrals and enjoy it and be productive about it, right?
No.
Yeah.
I think the only reason I really stuck with it was because, as a high schooler, math was always my strong subject. It was kind of like, the languages were not so strong. Like, I didn't like writing essays, but math was always strong. And so I think that I didn't understand that I couldn't understand this because it was a math class. So I kind of like kept showing up, and maybe that was kind of the secret. But then I guess that sort of touches a little bit on, because in the book you talk about talent a little bit, and how people think that you have talent or you don't have talent, but talent doesn't really mean anything.
I mean, in the running circles, we hear people say, well, actually, I'm not really a runner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they've gotten that into their mindset, like you would say, well, maybe I'm not good with languages. I think the example you give in the book is actually, and it's the stereotypical one, is art.
Yes.
Yes.
Where lots and lots of people say, I'm not an artist. I can't do that drawing thing.
Yep.
He was born with it. I wasn't. I can't do it. He can.
And there's a lady named Betty Edwards who has a course, and I learned about her through a book called Mindset by Carol Dweck, who references her as well. And she teaches people how to draw. And after a 2-day course, you see that these people draw amazingly well. And it's just about having some guidance and knowing like how to learn how to draw, how to think about drawing. Once you break those things down and you have the right coaching, suddenly something that you think is all talent you can realize like, actually, it's really just a skill that we can learn. And there's the thing about talent that makes everything so tricky is that it's obviously a factor in success. Like there is some element of talent. The thing I struggle with is that I think it's kind of pointless to focus on it because you don't have any control over it, right? It's just like, it is what it is for you. If you have it, that's great. If you don't, well, now you just have to figure out some other strategy to be successful. And in a sport like running, that, it might be a limiting factor in your ability to make the Olympics or something like that. Like I don't want to make it sound like talent is not a key element of some sort of level of ultimate success on the world stage or something like that. But I think the bigger thing, and this is what I learned about myself, is that when people fixate too much on talent, we don't really have the information we would need to be certain about talent. You have hints. Like one of the things I ask sometimes a younger runner, if I'm speaking to them, is, well, what would you need to know about me to be able to judge how much talent I have for running? And when you really think about it, they say, oh, I need to know your PRs. It's like, yeah, but you don't know what I did to get those PRs, right? Like you don't know how hard I trained if you just have my PR. And if I gave you how much I trained, okay, you maybe combine that with maybe my age, combine that with some other things, and you can triangulate a little bit, but you don't know how serious I was about the training. You don't know how you don't have all the variables. And I think what happens is we can underperform somebody else. We look at that person. I call this sort of the talent trap. You look at somebody else and you see their good performance, so they're talented because the performance indicates that they have at least that much talent. You look at your performance, it's not quite there, and you say to yourself, well, yeah, I probably just don't have the talent, and then at that point you've effectively decided that that it's not even worth doing the work, right? Like it's not even worth trying because you've kind of already limited what you think you can achieve. I'm very much try to orient people to not really stress about talent and to focus their efforts on or their mindset on their effort, because at least effort is controllable, whereas talent is not.
Yeah. I guess, like you said, there's so many things we can do to be better than we are today. And if we already think we're not talented, well, we might not do those things. And therefore, it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
100%. And I think a lot of the ways we sabotage ourselves without realizing it is that we adopt these sort of self-fulfilling prophecies. I like that word because I don't think I use it in the book, but it does fit that. It's like you sort of set, I tend to say you set your expectations, and your expectations guide how much work you do, right? And if your expectations are low, then you're probably not going to do the work to achieve a higher result, right? That's a simple thing. And the hardest part about it is that you can set low expectations for lots of reasons that you're not trying to. You're just doing it because it's like your default setting. It's because you don't have a framework that helps you to set a better expectation, or because you don't have the guidance from a coach or somebody who can kind of say, no, really, trust me, you need to set higher expectations. Like you are better than what you're aiming for. And so a lot of what I really do think about the book as sort of trying to give people ways to think a little bit differently about how they're training, and in hopes that they will make them realize, like, oh, maybe I've been limiting myself. And if I do these things, which the book also hopefully has some tips for how you can implement some of these strategies, then you can start to rethink how you're training and then get more out of training. And if you're consistent based off of, how leaps work and how feedback loops work, if you just keep doing this consistent work, everybody I've ever worked with they've always seen the improvement at some point in the future. And it sort of validates the process.
So it's kind of like staring at your math homework for 10 weeks and then all
Yes.
of a sudden understanding it.
Yeah, maybe, right?
I'm just going to go out there and stare at the track for
Stare at the track.
stare at the track for a few hours, and then eventually
Yeah.
my 50-second 400-meter time will just arrive.
It
Yeah.
will. I
maybe
have faith,
not.
Alan.
Maybe not, because there's an
Yeah.
effort. There's an effort. I think what you said is, you can have a good or a bad training program, but you need to underpin that or have a fundamental of effort underneath that, Bryan. That's basically what you were just saying. And in your book, actually, you have a pyramid with your training at the top and then effort underpinning that. But then you have attitude underpinning that. Is attitude what we've been talking about in terms of mindset and not having a closed mindset, or is there more to it than that?
No, I think attitude is a general, mindset's a good word for that too. I could have used that in place. I think there's a lot of different factors that go into your attitude. But the reason I like that visual is because it kind of implies that each level has a foundation below it. And so we tend to focus a lot on our training programs. We will look at, we'll say, well, I want to get a new PR, so let me go get a new training program. And a training program, some training programs are better than others, right? And that works, right? Like that, there's some benefit to that. But if you're kind of applying your effort poorly to a training program, switching the training program and keeping it with poor effort, you're not going to get that much benefit out of it. And then part of the reason why people don't apply their effort, as well as they can, is because of attitude or mindset. They either believe it's not worth it, or they have other things that are higher priority for them, or they have some blocks on their confidence or their belief in what they can do. Motivation and passion. I mean, one of my struggles throughout my career with running, which is funny because I wrote a book about it, is just sort of a general passion for the sport, right? In writing the book, I actually kind of was like analyzing myself, and I was saying, what sets some people apart from me, who I think I was just as talented as them in terms of my actual physical ability to run fast, was that they were just obsessively passionate about the sport. Like that, like it was the number one thing for them to get the most out of themselves as a runner. And at the same time, if I had matched them in that capacity and the effort and the thoughtfulness that they put into their training, because they cared so much about it, I might have been able to match their performances. But I was not as passionate about the sport. I probably never have been. And I'm more passionate right now about the psychology of improvement and these things. That's why I can write the book. It's not because I'm out there like trying to be the best runner in the world today, because I'm not. I'm more spending my time on the more academic kind of stuff, because that's where my passions maybe are stronger. But I really believe that comes down to sort of attitude and mindset, how much you care about it, how strong the goals are that you set, and how much they move you. Those things. And then I will throw this in here, because I don't know if other people typically put this in with attitude, but I literally think the way you think, the frameworks you use to solve problems, the strategies you utilize to get the most out of yourself, all fall under attitude, because they are all starting in your head. Right. And they dictate what you choose to do with your effort. So the priority for me is get your head right and get your attitude right, and really get your mindset right. Then apply your effort strategically as well as you can. And that's what the second part of the book, like you said in the intro, the first part is kind of mindset, and the second part is more about behavior and effort. And then your training methods, it's like you're going to get the most out of whatever you're doing. And if you can do that and you're not getting the results you want, I think that is a good indication that maybe you need to try a new training program. But most people keep changing training programs and not really doing the work to change the sort of effort or attitude or mindset or attitude that sort of underpins them.
Yeah, since we're on the topic of attitude and mindset, so that book that you referenced by Carol Dweck is actually on my I need to read one day list. So because it's been referenced in a few other running books that we've read. And in general, like there's, I've watched YouTube videos where she speaks about fixed mindset and growth mindset, but I found it really interesting. At one point you said it doesn't necessarily mean because somebody's a successful runner that they necessarily have a growth mindset. So I thought that was interesting. So maybe, like, I don't know if you want to maybe just briefly explain the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset, and then how could somebody that's a successful runner not have a growth mindset?
Yes. So this is really fascinating for me, and it's something I had to realize about myself. It was actually probably one of the main realizations that kind of made me understand how I was kind of self-sabotaging my own training at some point. And a fixed mindset is basically a belief that your talent defines what you're able to do, and that we all have a limit, and that limit is fixed. And so what ends up happening is our performances become a reflection of our talent. And what you're incentivized to do, if you have this belief about yourself, this mindset, is you want to demonstrate your talent. And if you can be successful, you want to be successful. But if you're not going to be successful, then the best thing to do is like avoid the challenge altogether, because if you fail, everybody's going to associate that with your talent, with you as a person. Like it reflects on you. And a growth mindset, as Carol Dweck defines it, is more that your focus is not limited by your talent, that you kind of believe you can do whatever you set your mind to, and it's about just developing, and your performance is just a reflection of how hard you work at something, and how much you apply yourself to it. And what that generates is no fear of failure, because failure just means that you haven't figured it out yet. And anything that you're working on is just a challenge to be overcome, and it kind of creates the basis for you to be passionate about what you're working on, because you're not worried about failing at it. You're just worried about getting better. So the fixed mindset leads you to only pursue things that you're confident you'll be good at, and then to back off or shy away from challenges that might set you up for failure. And I absolutely had this early on in my running career, and the way it manifested itself, I don't want to say, this is the other thing, I don't think there's like a either or. Some people might be very extreme and have a very strong fixed mindset or a very strong growth mindset, but I think most things are a spectrum. And I understood that if I worked hard, I would get better, but I also definitely thought that my talent was the defining characteristic of what made me good, right? And so I don't know where I sat on that spectrum perfectly, but what would happen is I would let's say I would do the work, but I wasn't like 100% putting myself into it, because I felt like, well, it doesn't really matter how much more I do, because I'm really talented, right? Like I can win these races without having to do all this extra stuff. And I had teammates who I think had a very strong fixed mindset, and they came in and they thought they were supposed to be really good runners because they were good in, say, junior high school or some other, and then they weren't as good, and then they just kind of checked out, and they were not motivated to run hard at all. And it was a lot because it was like, well, they don't want to be last on the team. That's not how they define themselves. They define themselves as being a really good runner, and the evidence in front of them on a daily basis is that they're not as talented, because that's how they think, right? So something like this is critical to unlocking the ability in yourself to work hard and to be passionate and to go after it. And the first part of your question, I think, was the fact that we can have a fixed mindset about one thing and a growth mindset about another. And so this is the other thing that I think is really important. I think a lot of runners actually do kind of have a growth mindset about running. They look at it, they're passionate about it, they see it as a challenge to improve and keep going. And then you put them in a setting where they need to learn a language, like me, and they'll just say, oh, well, I'm not somebody who can learn languages. And I do this in so many ways. I was thinking about, just the other day, I had a conversation, and I had this habit of saying, I'm not good at remembering names. I would meet someone and they would say, hey, like, my name's John. And I'd say, oh, hi, John. Really great to meet you. Oh, I just want to tell you, like, I'm really terrible at remembering names. And it would be like I would basically, yeah, I was like, oh, I have a fixed mindset about names, and I'm not good at it, so I'm not going to remember your name probably. And it would basically define the outcome right away. I see this in a lot of different places, and I think it's very possible that somebody can be a great student and have a lot of potential in running, but see themselves as somebody who probably doesn't have talent in running, and so they hold themselves back in it. It can go either way. You can have, in all areas of your life, I think it's very possible to have a fixed mindset about some of them and a growth mindset about the others. And I think a lot of that is just based off how it's introduced to you, and it could be part of how you're raised. It could be the environment you're in. It could be, I don't know, maybe there's some natural component to it, but a lot of it, I think, is social, about how we're raised to think about the different aspects of our lives.
Super interesting, because one of the things we've just done recently at our running club is we've had been organizing, in the absence of any real races, we've been organizing internal races, and we were having virtual, because we're still in shutdown types here. We're having virtual type races, and we organized a race which we called a handicap race, where we said, actually, we'll give you a target time based upon your ability. And I was organizing the race and had to speak with everybody about, oh, okay, I'm going to set, based on what you've been doing in the club, I'm going to set you a target of, let's say, 45 minutes for a 10K. How do you feel about that? And they go, yeah, 46 would be, I think, a tough challenge. And invariably what I found is that, and I've had this conversation now maybe 20 times across the season so far with people, was that I would set them a target which was a little bit harder than the target that they would set for themselves. So we would negotiate and we'd get to, say, 45 minutes. And they would say, okay, I think I can do 45 minutes. I say, okay, I'm setting you a target of 44. Oh, what? Yeah, I believe in you. I think you can do it. And I would always just tweak their number up. And almost 100% of the time, they achieve the number that I give them, because their own mindset is kind of, oh, I'm not that guy who can really tough it out at the end. We're talking about just your very average sort of club here, club runners. They're not honed. We're not honed athletes. So, it's all a mindset thing. They all say, Alan, you know my running better than I know myself. I said, no, I just know people a little bit more.
Well, that's the thing, right? And I feel like there's it's very possible that some of those people are, when you're talking to them about the challenge of hitting whatever the time, whether they're telling you directly or not, I'm sure that there's a handful who are thinking to themselves, I don't want to do this because I'm going to fail at this. And then when I don't hit the time, everybody's going to know like I'm not as good as they thought I was, or something like that, right? And that's like, if you're starting to hear those thoughts in your mind, like that might be a sign that like the fixed mindset is sort of is at work in some way, right? It's this I don't really want to do this because what are people going to think if I can't, about me, if I don't accomplish this goal, right? That basic, anytime you're thinking, what are people going to think about me if I fail? It's almost always a sign that there's a fixed mindset going on, and that you're tying the results too much to your self-identity. And that means you're associating it with something about you that's unchangeable and core to to who you are. And I think if you can get away from that, if you can recognize it, first of all, and then say to yourself, no, this is it, whatever my performance is, it's going to be the reflection of a little bit of my talent, but it's going to be the reflection of the work I did to get there. And if I don't achieve it, I can look at the work I did and I can see if it was if I really did everything I could. And if you keep that emphasis and your focus on the effort portion, in my mind, I tend to say, just don't worry about the talent. Like when I'm talking to people directly, if somebody's listening to this, I would say, don't worry about your talent and its reflection on you, because you don't know how talented you are. None of us know how talented we are. The only people who know how talented they are people like Meb Keflezighi, who literally dedicated his 25 years of elite training to answer that question. How talented am I? Like, how good am I? Most of us have not done that. And most of us never will. So the best we can do is make a couple guesses about our talent. And if those guesses are that your talent is low, you're just holding yourself back. Like, let's just leave that on the side and let's just focus on the plan, what you're going to do, how much effort you have to put into it. And try not to let this idea of how your performance is going to reflect on you hold you back from getting the most out of yourself.
And let's face it, you can't do a lot about your talent, so to speak. It's not like you can buy yourself a pot of talent juice.
And you can't measure
drink a bit of extra talent juice before you go out for training. It is what it is. What you can influence is other things. And to that extent, you can influence your training, but we also see, reading your book, that training is not all that it seems, because you talk about the normal training that people think about when they talk about training and the hidden training program. Maybe you could shed some light on that for us.
Yeah, I would love to, because this one is one of the core ideas that I feel resonate with a lot of people who hear it, because it's a different way of looking at something they might already sort of know. I like to talk about two different training programs. I call the first one the formal training program, and that is workouts you're doing, the stretching, whatever it is that your coach is basically saying, this is what you need to do, or you've decided you need to do. This is the workouts you're going to do. And that formal training program, I mean, for most of us, it might be a couple hours a day that you're spending on that. I don't know. It depends on how serious you are. Maybe right now, Alan said you're training to go sub 3 and you're doing a lot of things to sort of train more like the pros do and to really go after this. So you might be spending a larger number of hours on the formal training program than Elizabeth is right now, right? I couldn't say, but I think the hidden training program, I have a very generic definition, and that is everything you really need to do to be successful. And that means it's all the stuff that's not in your formal training program, but that will hold you back from getting the most out of your formal training program if you don't address it. And that can be a wide range of things. The first thing, of course, is the really basic stuff that you might think about, which is like your sleep and your diet, your hydration, your, I mean, if you have a job, it's sort of like your time commitments and what energy that takes out of you in order to, as you go about your day, it's kind of things. We see a very direct correlation to that, to how they affect our formal training program. But I think there's also other things in here, which is sometimes the hidden training program is, you've got some confidence issues that you need to work through, and that are like your training is you're going to have to train this aspect of how you think about yourself or how you think about your ability, because if you don't, it's going to hold you back. And I look at mental training and my book is in many ways trying to introduce some of these concepts that I think are core to what an elite athlete thinks about when they're training. They're trying to cover every aspect with the sports psychology, with the diet, the sleep, the and all the work they're doing. They're looking at everything. Most of us aren't looking at everything, and we sort of know the other stuff matters, but we also don't have the energy and bandwidth to deal with it and to really put it in its place. And so after talking about the hidden training program, once you understand how important it is, I feel like then later in the book, I talk about, well, here's some strategies you can use for how to like create systems to try to automate some of these things and try to get the most out of having to overspend your energy and your focus on them and stuff. So I do try to provide some solutions to it, but the gist of the hidden training program is that there's so much more that's like your entire life really is affecting your training. And it's perfectly reasonable to not to comport or convert your entire life to be your training. But you have to accept that those things are having a big impact. And the more you think about them and create some sort of a strategy around them, the more likely they will be to contribute to your improvement as opposed to contribute to holding you back.
But also, I guess it's a good time to touch on like some things way more than other things. Like they have they can have a bigger impact on your performance than other things. So
yes,
I guess it kind of reminds me of what I would hear about, I think it was in a podcast about recovery, and the person was a sleep scientist. And so she said, people, they'll invest on all these trackers that'll track your heart rate variability and all these metrics to like see how ready you are for your next training. But she said, if you just add 1 hour of sleep every day of the week, then you can get a huge performance benefit because you'll be way more recovered. In your book, I think you talk about the momentum model. So maybe you can explain the momentum model.
Sure. This is perfect because I love this. And this is another one of those things that just once I started putting this together, it unlocked ways of thinking for me. The momentum model is very simple. And it's this idea that you're a ball. And if you think of it abstractly, you're a ball that has to move up a hill. And we all know balls don't roll up a hill. Like, if anything, they're just going to stay at the bottom and not move. And if you want to roll a ball up a hill, you apply some sort of force to move that ball up the hill. And those forces could be kind of inside of you internally, which is your effort and your belief in yourself and your motivation and all these positive forces that you apply towards getting yourself up that hill. And they can be external, like your coaches or your family or your colleagues or your teammates. They can all sort of support you and push you and help to get you to your goal as well. And that's pretty much what you have going for you in terms of trying to achieve your goal is the amount of effort you're going to put into it and the amount of support you can get from outside. But just as we have these positive forces, we have some negative forces too. And this could be our lack of confidence. It could be health issues. It could be internal to us. Maybe we have bad habits and routines and things that are holding us back. Those would be sort of negative internal forces that are slowing our ability to reach the goal. And then there's negative external forces. And these can be things like, obligations outside of your training. It could be not having any money to pursue some of the things you need to do. It could be things like COVID, obviously a gigantic, you talk about some forces are bigger than others, right? COVID is a big enough negative force that it's kind of like shutting down industries and the world. And whereas a smaller negative external force might be that friend of yours who wants you to keep going out with them every night. And it's hard to say no, but you kind of know you should because it's not really helping you get where you want to go. And then, your goal is up at the top and that hill can be as high as your goal. If your goal is to be an Olympic champion, that's a crazy high hill you've got to climb. And you're going to have to do everything right to get to the top of that hill and get all of your forces in alignment. If your goal is smaller, it's a lower hill, right? And the other last little bit of it is in the way there are obstacles. You're going to have to go around them. You're going to have to go through them. There's things that are going to slow you down, and you're going to have to prepare for those and predict that they're coming and get by them in some way. They're going to slow your momentum. And the whole idea of this model is that when you look at your training in totality and you kind of put some of these arrows in this picture, you draw arrows, big arrows for the big forces and small arrows for the small ones, and you kind of try to identify these things, you start to realize there's a lot of areas for improvement. You can take your positive arrows and try to make them bigger. You could take the negative arrows and try to get rid of them entirely, or at least reduce them. You could take these obstacles and try to just like avoid them, right? You can, all of these things are just, it's a simple way in my mind to frame the problem in a way that's a little bit abstract, but very holistic. You can kind of see the whole picture, right? There's a bunch of things that I just think you can take from it. But one of the key things is that some of those forces that are driving you forward or driving you backwards are way more important than the other ones. And if you don't do the work to identify what those are, you could spend all day fixing any problems and make no progress, because the really big challenge you need to resolve is just bigger and stronger than all those little forces you're trying to, improve. Yeah, I don't know if I should leave it there and you tell me, Liz, what you think about it on your end, or if it applies to you. Because for me, it's a way I go to when I'm thinking about my goal and the problem I need to get to. I can literally draw it on a whiteboard and just put down 2 or 3 things in each category. And usually things are the 2 or 3 most important things I got to figure out, because they're clearly the ones that have the most effect.
That model and seeing it drawn that way was pretty neat, because like you said, you'll have the thicker arrows and the thinner arrows, and the thicker ones are the ones that are kind of like more important. Let's say if you're only sleeping 6 hours a night, like Alan used to do when he was an executive, and now all of a sudden he goes to 8 hours a night. Well, look what happened. He just, his performance just boomed. And so, yeah, I kind of like that visual representation. And then also, that's, I think, sort of where you can apply the 80-20 rule, because you can say, 20% of the change can have 80% of the positive effect. So you just have to, if you identify it, then you can make some changes, and they don't have to be like big changes, and you don't have to change everything. And I think it's good that you mentioned in the book, it's not about always like changing everything, all the arrows, and pointing them all in the right direction. It's about changing the bigger ones.
I mean, from my point of view, 8 hours seems to be working in terms of sleep. So I'm going to go for 10 hours. I'm gradually on my way to building up to almost sleeping the whole day and just getting up to
I think that might become a negative arrow
I guess that's probably not the thing. But in terms of picking the arrows, I mean, one of the things we talked about in the podcast that I tried to do with my running form is just run with my head up. So straight up, just focus on that. There's loads of things wrong with my running form, but let's just focus on that, because that's going to get me, the next step forward, and to be looking at, and my advice to people would be to looking at what's the next thing, what's the next obstacle, what's the next little hidden training program thing that you could be focusing on. I mean, for Liz, it could be she has this mental block about trail running. And
I do.
we go trail running.
Really?
and
Okay.
and we go on a trail, and we were out on a trail on, I think it was Wednesday night, but we hadn't planned to go on the trail. And this was like, mentally closed. She just closed down. She's just like, what are we doing here? Don't want to be here doing this. And suddenly the training program became not a joyous event. It became bit of a mid-level.
This is so
event.
fascinating.
So
Yeah.
I'm just throwing examples around. Just
For me, trail running, I don't know. There's a bit of a blockage, because for me, trail running, I just find it's so, I guess it's really like mentally taxing, I find, because I go and I run, and I can run like 10K workouts, like 3 times 3K. And I find that going to run on a trail with lots of rocks and roots where I have to figure out where to put my feet at every single step is like, I leave that, and maybe physically I'm like kind of okay. Mentally, I'm exhausted. Like every time we do sort of our first trail run of the year, because as you can see, I have teammates that love to go on the trails. So sometimes just to be part of the group, you just got to do it. And I'll get back from, a long run, which instead of being like 30K will be maybe 20K because it was in the trail. And my brain is like, just feels like I did math homework for 2 days, like just completely. Yeah, I don't. And I think it's because I have to focus so much. So when I'm not mentally prepared, it's like, yeah, that day in the trails, it was an easy run day because we had run like one of those virtual 10K races on the weekend. And so the coach was like, well, just go for an easy run. And he was like, let's just go on the trails. And so I was like, okay, fine, we'll go on the trail. I thought he meant like the wide trail, like just the gravel road that goes through the park, not the like little trails on the sides. And then all of a sudden he's like, let's go in here. And I was like, oh no, my brain totally turned off.
That is really, it's so funny because it's completely opposite to me. Like if I can go find a nice trail, I'm just sort of like, well, I just enjoy the experience in its own way. But I think that the interesting thing I would say to me is like, I don't know if this is something that you want. Okay, here's how I'll frame it in the momentum model. Cause let's talk about this. You have this like, I'll just put it as a medium-sized, I guess, negative internal force about when you get on trails. It slows you down, something about it, whatever it is. Like there's a couple ways you can deal with this. And in your case, it's on how much you care. One is you can, I guess, put some effort into trying to turn that into a positive, or at least make it as small as possible so that you don't feel these negative feelings. And it might be there as a negative, but it's so small that it's not causing you an issue. Like, whereas today it might be actually literally holding you back a little bit in your ability to do those runs. The other part of it, and this is like maybe a hard thing because you have teammates and stuff. It's just kind of like, well, maybe you should just not be running on trails. Like that's just like the simplest solution to not having this hold you back is don't put yourself in an environment that is not good for you. Right. And I say the same thing about like teammates or something. It's like, well, if you really like, if you get a lot out of running with one person and you don't get a lot out of running with somebody else, I think it's reasonable to try to run more with the person you get a lot out of, right? Like it's set yourself up for success by just choosing those things, which is hard for you because Alan wants to go on the trails and maybe you don't. Like, but I think
in terms of the alternatives you've just described, one of the ones you said was maybe you should just not go on the trails. However, if you do the analysis of last year's season, we did a trail running season, a little section where we did some trail running and built up some strength and on trails. Liz then came into a marathon training program and ran a PR marathon.
Well, it was 2019, but we missed a year because of COVID. So
let me give you.
It was actually like a year and a half ago now.
Let me give you a couple other things that I think really make a difference on some of this stuff. One is, I would say, don't do important workouts on the trails. but maybe get out on the trails and do it, but do it on easy runs or something where you literally don't have else you need to worry about. It's not about hitting this distance goal for that run, or maybe it's not about a time that you're trying to run or a pace. It's just about going out and having a good time and having a conversation, and build up to the fact that those runs are totally manageable and not stressful because there's expectations about them. The other thing I would say is, I don't know if this is going to apply. I'm going to speak out loud as I think this through, and we may disagree. I may come to a conclusion that this is a bad idea after I say it. But I talk with young runners about race strategy sometimes, and I say, well, how often do you go into a race with a plan with your plan that you're going to execute is not with a goal to get the best place. It's to learn how to race in that way, right? How to execute a specific plan. And so, for example, it might be, a runner who is really good at sitting and kicking to win a race. They will sit and kick in every race because they know that's their best strategy to win, right? To get the best result. But sometimes that runner has to be put in a position to go out in the front and lead the race and try to run from the front and see what they can do. Because as a runner, you have to learn what you're good at and what you're not good at. You have to develop more skills than just the ones that you already know you have, right? You have to be a little more well-rounded. You almost have to pick times to fail, right? Like you have to pick a race where you're going to try this, knowing that the might be terrible, but it's about the process of getting better. It's not about the result of that race. And in the same way, I think about your, now this is where I don't know if it's going to make any sense, but you go to the trails and like, pick a goal that has that's totally different from what you've ever done. It's like, I don't know what it would be. I'm trying to think about, I don't know, counting the routes that you step over on the run or something like this, right? Like you're going to go and see, like, just you're curious on this trail, how many routes do you have to step over while you're running? So now you're running along and it's about like your pace. It's not about this. It's taking this thing that stresses you out, which is, I hate having to look for routes and step over them because I just want to run. Well, now you've turned that into a little mini challenge for yourself and to just sort of something to focus on in a hopefully more positive way. And at the end of the run, I would just be curious how you felt about it. Like maybe you finished the run with more stress and maybe you finished the run with no stress. And now it's a case of, okay, we learned a little something about how to handle, like what's causing the stress and how to handle it. And so if you can come up with some sort of way to trick your brain to force you to focus on something different than what's driving the stress, it might create some opportunities for you to get more out of those workouts.
Counting routes, that could work.
I don't know.
That could work, because then while you're counting the routes, it's like counting sheep. While you're counting sheep, then your brain is not doing all those things that are preventing you from sleeping. That's why you fall asleep when you count sheep. But so if I count the routes. To
be fair to Liz, we're often on the trail together, and I invariably end up telling stories about trail running in Australia. So say, in Australia, there'd be a spider's web that could cover the whole of this trail width. And that when you run into them, it feels like this. And so now I think Liz associates trail running with horrible experiences because I'm like, we saw a snake and they're the most deadly snakes in the world, these types of snakes. And we saw one, we had to jump over it. Otherwise it would have bitten us. And I think
there was this
psychologically I've given her
a couple runs ago actually. It was one of those situations where there was a log on the road, and so like I was like, oh great, hurdle, and I jump over the log, and he's like, you should never do that in Australia because there could be a snake on the other side.
Always jump onto the log, see what's on the other side, and then jump off the log.
So
this is good for me to keep in mind. I grew up in the desert, and we didn't see many, but there were rattlesnakes and stuff and running out. And when you get out in those areas, they were so rare that we didn't really think about them. But on the other side, you think there are certain little things you don't do, right? Which is you don't just like, I'm going to stop and tie my shoe, so I'm going to step off into the bushes on the side. You just don't do it, right? Because that would be dangerous. I don't know. I don't have a solution for you, but I think it's funny because here's what I would say, Liz, and put it back in the context of what we were talking about earlier on the hidden training program. If your training requires you to go on the trails a lot, then your hidden training program includes something that Alan's doesn't, which is some sort of a mental blockage on how to get more out of your trail runs, right? And so for you, understanding that and addressing it might actually be key to getting more out of yourself in a way that like Alan doesn't need to. It's just, he just doesn't have that as a challenge to overcome. And I think that goes back to this point of your mindset can be different about different things. I don't want to speak for Alan. He may have a different mindset about how he feels about working out on the track. Like he might look at the track and just be like, running laps around the track is so exhausting and mentally like it's mind numbing and I don't want to do it. I want to be on the trail where I'm free and I can run like by a feeling. I resonate with that too, because when I was in college, we used to do tempo runs on the streets and I was okay at them. I did fine. When we moved those tempo runs to the track, all of a sudden I was just like, look, all I need to do is just keep hitting this pace. And that was like, I did not get bored with it. I thrived on the idea of just getting on the track and just hitting this pace over and over again, every 200, just hearing the same number and just getting in that sort of zone around it. And I had teammates who were just like, you'd be like, we're doing the tempo run on the track. And their first thought would be like, oh my God, I can't believe I have to do 20 laps. Right. That was just like the idea of doing the same lap over and over again was daunting to them. Right. So I think all of these things are just examples that are real world examples of about how the way we think about aspects of our training can affect the effort we put into them. And then of course, that's going to affect our results.
To square the ledger, my blind spot is probably nutrition. Liz does quite a bit of work on her nutrition and I do nothing. It's just like, where's the food? Eat the food. Yeah. Okay, I feel okay, let's run. And why do I have to, what's this calorie counting and why do I have to measure the number of carbs? This is really irritating. I don't want to have to do this. But in fact, some aspects of it, and I'm becoming aware, some aspects of it could help me. And, we need to do everything this year. So we need to work on all aspects and we have time to do it and we have the motivation to do it.
Yeah, what I generally think about what you just said is that I have two different chapters. One is on purposeful practice and the other is on systems and how to use systems to your benefit. And I think of them as being sort of partners or I don't know what you call them, like two sides of the same coin, right? In terms of what you're trying to do. Purposeful practice is, how are you going to show up and do the workouts that you need to do to really improve. And that's your formal training program often. It's really how you want to get the most out of those. And purposeful practice is going to get you there. And we can talk about that in a second, because I was going to talk about systems here. The systems, there's like all this other stuff in the hidden training program. You just mentioned diet. Well, diet is critical. It's maybe not as critical as what you're doing in practice and the work you're doing. It's arguable that I'm sure there are people who will debate with me, like which one's more important, diet or sleep or other aspects. It's in that range of very important, maybe not the most important thing in terms of getting your results. Okay. Now you're just not that passionate about it. You're not that interested in it. It obviously there's something about it that doesn't resonate with you in a way that makes you want to invest your time to get the most out of this portion of your life. So in that case, I look at it and say, you need a system. And a system is I basically define it as a routine or a set of rules to live by that generally gives you a positive result. It kind of keeps your momentum positive, or it gives you a positive outcome with as minimal effort as possible. Right. And a lot of what a good system means is sort of, you got to put the effort into figuring out what system could work for you. And then once it's running, you should hopefully not be thinking about it at all. You should just be doing it and just getting the benefits from it. And so if you can create a system around your diet, which might include some rules about what you're going to eat and not eat, and that's something that you can adhere to. I have a rule in myself, like I just don't drink sodas anymore. I made the rule. It's just a rule. Like if somebody offers me a soda, it's like, no, I just don't drink soda. Like I still drink other unhealthy things, but at least I've started there. Right. It's, but other things with diet, it's, well, what are you going to buy? What are you going to keep in your fridge? Because if there's certain foods you don't want to eat, the best way to not eat them is to not have them in your fridge. Right. Because if it's there, you're probably going to eat it. And I don't think we should fight that. I don't think we should make it harder for ourselves to avoid eating that thing. The more you can sort of structure your environment and create some rules that you believe in and that resonate with you as who you are, and that you can tie to sort of that make you feel good about following them, right? If you can do that, now your diet, it goes back to that 80-20 rule. You can put like a tiny amount of effort into it and get 80% of the benefits of what you need for your diet without having to make diet something that's stressful and that you're putting in that you don't want to put into it.
Yeah, my future son-in-law actually has just started me off on this system for nutrition approach, and the very, very, very simple first steps, baby steps, because I'm not interested really, is when you get up, when you get up in the morning, drink a glass of water. So you've now started your hydration. It's begun, and it's an easy habit to develop. Just get up, drink a glass of water, because it's a while before I get to a glass of water. Usually I'm having a cup of coffee and then a second cup of coffee and looking around for breakfast. My habits are not bad. It's just I'm not, not very systematic about it, not very engaged, I guess, with that. So I'll start with that. What is it that I can do that I could build into my routine that then will stop being visible to me? It'll just be part of, just you get up, you put your right sock on, you put your left sock on, you drink a glass of water.
Yeah, this is stuff that I don't think the book goes into this in detail about habit creation, and there's some other books that I think are dedicated to this that explain this really well. That if you're trying to change your habits and your routines, and you're trying to make a new system, the more change you're trying to make, the harder it's going to be to sustain it. Right? It's why New Year's resolutions don't work, because people go from nothing to I'm going for the big. I'm gonna be different this year.
Yeah.
And I think what happens with systems, with the way I think about them, is find something that makes sense. It's as doable as possible. The key aspect is, can you actually do it? Can you follow through on the system? Because if you make a system, this drinking water, and you're finding after 2 weeks, every morning, you never drink the glass of water. Well, okay, now we got to figure out this. You're obviously not following the system. There's some problem with this. What can you do? Well, maybe you need to have the glass of water sitting next to your bed when you go to sleep, so that when you wake up, literally before you do anything, it's sitting there and you drink the water, and you basically make a rule for yourself. I can't go to the bathroom in the morning until I've finished this cup of water, because you have to go to the bathroom. So you're incentivized to just get that water down, because the first thing everybody wants to do is go to the bathroom, right? So I think you could do little tricks like that, but the fundamental thing is start as small as possible. Find something that is momentum positive, that helps you, and it's something you can build off of. And once it's in place and it becomes normal, you can keep building, right? And you can put as much effort into these things as you want. And that's where I look at things like sleep and diet are things we all struggle with. I don't think we need to go aim to be the best sleeper, or have the best diet, or the best recovery routine, or the all these things that but you have to have something that's positive. If it's not positive, it's by definition either neutral or negative, and that's not what you're going to need if you have a goal that you're trying to achieve. You need these things to be positive, because you're going to have obstacles. You're going to have other forces that are going to hold you back that you can't immediately address. So it's kind of like I use this frame: get all your arrows in the right direction, right? If you can get all your arrows in the right direction, a bunch of small arrows pointing in the right direction can overcome some big negative challenges you have to overcome. But if all your small arrows sort of like what do you call it, neutralizing each other, right? Like they're like you're basically setting yourself up to have more difficulty overcoming the obstacles when you arrive at them.
There's a term in your book, just to switch the subject up a little bit, that I've never seen before, I don't think, in chapter 6, optimal training principle number 5, which refers to self-efficacy or self-efficacy.
Yes.
I don't know whether you say efficacy or efficacy. That could be
well,
a controversy,
I say
or or a controversy.
Controversy.
Is it self-efficacy or self-efficacy?
For me, it's self-efficacy, but I'm from California, so I don't know. Yeah, I think we'll see. Everybody might disagree.
Yeah, but I think my understanding around that is it's a fundamental belief in yourself, a belief in your capabilities, and I think plus or minus, we all don't quite believe in ourselves enough and need to believe in ourselves a little bit more. As I explained earlier, we can do a little bit more than we think we can do sometimes. If only we have that self-belief. We didn't think, I'm not a real runner and those kind of things, but that's fine. But, most people, they just want to just get on with things. How can you improve the belief in yourself?
Yeah. Of all the ideas in the book, somehow this one comes up a lot for me in conversations. And I think the reason is that, it applies to a lot of the things that I end up talking to people about what they're doing, like what they're working on, what they're trying to achieve, like goal setting and everything. So self-efficacy, very simply, is the belief that you can accomplish something based on the effort that you put into it. So efficacy has the same root as effort, right? It's an effort-based belief in what you can do. And if you have a fixed mindset, you might have low self-efficacy because you're like, well, it's all talent anyway. It doesn't matter what I do. If you have a growth mindset, you're probably likely to have a higher self-efficacy, generally, a general belief that your effort matters. But you might have a growth mindset about both, say, learning Spanish and being a runner, but you might have a higher amount of self-efficacy about running than you do about Spanish. Like you might really believe that your effort's going to pay off with running, and you might sort of generally think they're going to improve. And so I think it's tied to the mindset that we talked about earlier, fixed and growth mindset. Now, this is the thing I think that's great about this is self-efficacy is tied to the task that you're trying to accomplish. If we're talking about running and you have a goal to run a sub 3 hour marathon, it is your belief that if you put the necessary amount of effort into it, that you will be able to achieve that goal. And that belief is fundamental. It really is fundamental to your ability to achieve it. And the great thing about self-efficacy is that researchers have studied this, and there are specific strategies you can use to improve your self-efficacy. And I can walk through a couple of them really briefly. I'll keep it really, really simple. But the four main ones that I talk about in the book, I think there might actually be arguments about others as well. So I'm going to sort of, we could get into those if you want to talk about those other ones too. But personal experience, and this is really simple. If you've done it once, you can probably do it again. I think this is a key one for a lot of people. If you've
well, just to interrupt you briefly, we had a conversation just this weekend. And Liz and I have both said, if we can run a 10K run under 39 minutes, we can train, because we know how we can train. We can train and run a sub 3 hour marathon. And so we have to, during our 10K programs, run under 39 minutes. And we did that. At the weekend. Liz did that at the weekend. And we said to ourselves, we believe now that we can run this sub 3 hour marathon. Because
Perfect.
We set ourselves up for an example of personal experience. So exactly what you just said, in fact, we did that over the weekend, didn't we, Liz?
Mm-hmm. But I can also tell you how this has held me back in the past as well, because then the opposite is true as well. In the past, I had a different coach and I was on a different team, and he used to sometimes have the bar was set much higher than I would have set it for myself, based on what I had completed in training. And so training became like very, like if I, for example, he went through a phase of in the marathon program, he wouldn't put runs longer than 2.5 hours, but I was running a marathon in like 3:15 at the time. So it means I didn't have time on my feet equivalent to the marathon. And so I didn't gain, I would gain a lot of confidence from doing a 3 hour long run, but not so much from a 2.5 hour long run, because I was like, well, this means I have no experience running for over 3 hours, not even close to 3 hours.
I find this fascinating because I, in some sense, side with your coach a little bit, in that I know ultra runners who run 100-mile runs who don't ever train to run like 100 miles in their training, because they know that doing it destroys their legs in a way that it is unnecessary in order to be able to do it. So there is some truth to the idea that you don't have to run the full distance in order to adequately prepare to run it when it's time to do it. But what you both of you guys are talking about is self-efficacy, because especially around this first one about your personal experience, you can use it to boost your self-efficacy or to hold yourself back in some sense. If you're associating the only way I'll know I can do this is that I've done it before, or that I've done something that gives me the equivalent, that can be a positive or a negative. I like to think of it as the positive. Like you said, Alan, I love the idea of like, if we can run 39, then we can do this. You're setting benchmarks that are indicating that you do have the ability, and that will boost your belief to do it. And I really think about this, the biggest way this works is you go and you run your race, you run sub 3 hours. If you actually do run sub 3 hours, the next time you go out to run, you're going to be pretty confident that you can run sub 3 hours, that there's nothing stopping you from doing that because you've literally done it before. Right. But what you said is great, because it's more of a a different level of personal experience. It's not exactly doing what you think you could do, but it's a proxy, right? And speaking of proxies, that's one of the other ways is what we call vicarious experience. And that is, if somebody else can do it, then you can probably do it. And the key thing here is, do you relate to that person? Like, do you identify with them as being sort of equivalent in some capacity with your ability or your how you relate to them? If you look at, if I look at Meb and say, oh, Meb ran 2:08 for the marathon, that means I can run 2:08. It might not really work that way because I don't identify myself exactly the same way as Meb. But when Roger Bannister, the 4-minute mile, all the other guys who were close to him and looked and said, well, that's it. Obviously, if he can do it, I can too. And within a number of months, so many more people started breaking the record. And it just became you see these examples all the time. Somebody does something and you look at it and you say, oh, well, if they can do it, I know I can do it. And I've had this experience in numerous ways in my career with specific runners. I talk about some of it in the book.
Yeah, it's like having a teammate, like when you're running with a teammate. So sort of when Alan and I were running Toronto Marathon a few years ago together, and at the end, Alan was actually like, he was just pulling away, but I was sort of like, well, I've been training with him. So I managed to just put in the extra effort that it took, and we stuck together to the end. But it was like the last 2 kilometers where you're suffering, and he was just pulling away because he was maintaining the pace and I wasn't maintaining the pace. And then all of a sudden I was maintaining the pace. So I guess it's a little bit like that.
Well, that's 100% what it is, because when you've done all the workouts with someone, I had this experience at UCLA with my teammates. I had guys who maybe had better PRs than me, but every day in practice, I was doing the same workouts with them. Like, there was nothing different about what I was able to do. And some days I was better than them in practice. So when you get to the workout, when you get to the race, it's like, it's a boost. Like, you literally do believe that you can do it because you have a lot of evidence, whether it's your personal experience of completing the workouts, or it's the vicarious experience that this person has done this time before, and I am just as good as him. So that's proof. And then the last one, I don't, there's others, but the one that I think is just the extra strongest is social persuasion. But this is basically somebody who you really trust tells you that they are confident you can do it. And when, this is a classic coach example, like when a coach says to you, I've looked at your workouts, I've looked at what you're doing, you've done all the work, I am 100% confident that you can hit them. That will literally at least has the potential to change your belief about what you can do, right? It has the ability to boost your self-efficacy, the belief that you can accomplish it. And these are really critical. It's kind of why we have to package this up. You have to create milestones that help to give you the indication that you've done it before, that you're on track, right? That your personal experience is good. You have to find people who've done it before that you relate to, so that you can look at it, and whether that's a teammate or a competitor or somebody else that you know of, you say, look, if they can do it, I can too. It's so powerful. And then the last one is having a coach or having an expert or having someone like Alan, in your case, Liz, who might say, look, Liz, like, I know this stuff, like, you can do it. And as long as you believe him, it's going to help you to believe that you can do it yourself.
Mostly it's vice versa. Liz tells me because she's the one who knows.
Yeah, I had a coach. My previous coach would do this a lot. Like, he would set these goals for every distance that were just kind of like in my head off the chart, and then eventually, like, they would just happen. Yeah, it's I guess that's the classic example. But I didn't believe that I could run them, and then all of a sudden, like, you finish the race, and you're like, what was my time?
Yeah, and it's funny. I wonder, say a case like yours, Liz, if you go back in and you had a couple more of maybe some of these frameworks from the book in your mind at the time when you were doing these things, and you had the ability to take what your coach was saying, and you're struggling to believe it, or you're stressed about, I don't know, like, can I really do this? And now you look at, if you were able theoretically to look at it through some of these different lenses, would you have embraced it a little bit more? Or would you have held yourself back in the same way? Or would you have struggled in the same ways? I would like to think that having some of these concepts in mind for the people who read the book, they will encounter these challenges or these obstacles or these goals or the training plans, and have maybe one more tool in their toolbox for helping them to get do the work they need to achieve their goal.
I think the one thing that I would have liked to have your book for was you did mention at one point in the book that, sometimes what we do and it holds us back is that because we're stressed about a goal, all of a sudden we convince ourselves that it doesn't really matter anyway. So it's like you really want to achieve this goal and then like you're really stressed about it. And all of a sudden one day you're just like, well, it doesn't matter anyway. So who cares like what happens? And then so, it's sort of your goal is to bring down the pressure of the situation, but it's not really helpful. So yeah, I kind of wish, because I think I did that a lot. Like I didn't maybe talk about it at the time and I didn't maybe realize that it was a problem, but like I did a lot of that. Would be you'd get to like the you'd be building up the cross country season and you'd get to provincials, and provincials was still kind of like okay, and then you get past provincials and it was as if like just like the lid popped from the bowl full of steam. I would just be like, okay, well, this last one, I mean, it's nationals. I'm not going to place well anyway. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like provincial championships was the, was my goal race. And then I would just kind of go into it, and I would still push hard, I think, but like, I wonder now, looking back, like if it wasn't sort of, if I wasn't blocking my own potential, because I never did well in that the very last meet. It would always be the second to last one that I would kind of, I think, perform the best.
There's something, it's a little different for me, but I had this experience where I would do really well for a season and I would be so dedicated. I would put all the effort in and I would be really consistent and I would do all the work and I would see that I would make that leap and I would improve and I would get to the next level. And then it would be so hard for me to mentally shift and accept that I need to change now, right? Like I need to still make another change to keep improving. I had this experience. I write about it a little bit in the book of I made the leap and the next year I come back and my coach was like, we're going to change the tempo runs. We're going to change this up. We're going to do fartlek style. We're going to mix in these different aspects to the tempo runs. And at the time, I mean, I associated so much of my success with my ability to execute those tempo runs. And it seems kind of weird now, but I like latched onto those things as like the tempo runs were central to my ability to form that year. And when he changed the tempo runs, I was super resistant to it, but in a way that was sort of passive. Like I was kind of talking to him about it, but I wasn't addressing the real issue of like why it was stressing me out. Like, as I wasn't as open about it as I needed to be. What would happen is I would like say to myself, like, I don't know, like I got to trust him. I'm going to do this. But like, I was struggling with these internal conflicted belief about how much this mattered, how much it didn't matter. I thought it mattered a lot, but I kind of wasn't 100% sure. And I would get to this point where I was not confident about my results, even if the work I was doing was good. And I would walk into the race and I would say like, well, I don't know, like if I'm ready to run this race, because I don't feel the same way I felt last year, and I don't have the same indicators to show I'm ready, and so if I don't perform well, that's probably why. And then I would go not perform well, and I would blame the tempo runs, and I would sort of, it was all these mind games that you end up playing. It's a little different from what you're saying, but I feel like there's this like, well, like, oh, this one probably doesn't. There's probably a reason that I'm not going to run well in this. And I know what that reason probably is. And it's not my fault. So whatever, I'm not going to put too much pressure on myself because I don't know, all this stuff. I'm reliving it a little bit now, but in the same way, it seems silly now because I feel like it was all solvable by having some really frank discussions, taking responsibility for it on my end and going in and saying, I'm struggling with this. This is what I don't understand. Maybe I just need to understand it better. I'm confused. Why would we change the plan when obviously I'm improving? I was improving on the other end. Why do we need to change it? I didn't have the confidence and the ownership of my own training to sort of do that at the time. And I guess I don't have an answer for yours at this moment about what your specific example. I went down a different path, but I feel like there's a lot of situations like what you experienced and what I experienced where there's disconnects between what you're ready to do and what you have maybe trained to do and what you believe you can do. And if we don't address those and you don't have some framework for addressing them, they're going to probably hold you back when it matters. It's really when in the bigger races is probably when it's gonna come up, because of the added pressure, because of the added stress of it, because of the level of competition, right? Like it's just a different, it requires more of you. So it resonates, your story resonates. I don't have that exact experience, but it definitely, I feel like it connects on this more basic level, which is not being ready for something and then sort of dismissing, like accepting the negative result beforehand because
before it happens,
because it's a self-preservation mechanism, right? It's like, oh, well, like I'm not going to let this, maybe it's a sign of a little bit of a fixed mindset. It's like, well, I'm not going to let this define me because I don't care anyway. Like that's the classic fixed mindset, is like, well, my result doesn't reflect on me because I didn't care anyway. Right. And that's, and that's what your defense mechanism often is to say like, well, I'm not going to put the energy in, I don't care about it. And that way, if somebody else thinks it defines me, I can say, well, I didn't care anyway. And then I don't have to feel that way.
Yeah, well, I think that's not the case for Liz, because we were talking last week with Martin Yelling about his book, and he was saying, look, what difference does it make if at the end of the day you finish in 3001 or 259.59? And we're going, are you kidding? It makes all the difference in the world. So we care.
I basically agree a little bit more with him probably. And maybe that's, I talk about in the book as well, this idea of norm reference, self-reference goals, and like 3 hours, for a marathon is a very clear like norm reference goal. There's a standard, it's 3 hours. I want to hit it. I want to go under that time. And that's what I'm going to do. And 301 is failure. 259 is success. Like that's kind of how norm goals work, right? You either hit them or you don't. Yeah. And a norm reference goal my basic rule about goals is if that goal motivates you, then that's good. Like that's what you the job of a goal is to motivate you to do the work to achieve. And if norm reference goals motivate you, that's fantastic. But it doesn't feel the same emotionally. It doesn't feel the same. But 301 and 259 are just really not different from each other in the bigger picture. And if you have a plan to make what I call self-reference goal, which is more process oriented, and how you are planning to execute your plan in order to get the sub 3 hour goal. If you can have a goal sitting with that 3 hour goal, and you say, I'm going to do the 3 hour goal, that's my norm reference goal, but I also have a plan to execute it in this way. I want to hit these splits. I want to be ready in this way. I want to show up and I want to execute this plan. And let's say you execute the plan, but it's a really windy day and you end up running 302 or something like that. But you did everything. It just didn't quite get the final time. Now you can walk away from the race going, well, it was a 3 hour effort. I know I can do it in the future. It kind of builds my self-efficacy. Next time I'll get it because conditions didn't work in my favor. But you also don't have to look at that 302 as a failure. You can look at the process that you executed and the plan that you executed as another way of measuring your performance and a different measuring your success. And I think that's something that can help us to not get caught up in the time is the only thing that matters, right? It's yeah.
I agree entirely with what you're saying, and let's just reframe it. And Liz, you can chip in if you don't agree with me. We for sure are motivated to do this normalized goal. The motivation around that engages us in our training process. So what it does is we use that to engage ourselves in our training process. The result that we get at the end of the first test, when we go to the marathon line and we try to run, doesn't define us. But today, don't tell us that it doesn't matter, because it's the thing that's driving our engagement in the training process. And we're also working very hard at having a joyful training process, actually enjoying it, having fun, running through some trails and going, ooh, look, there's no spider webs. We're not in Australia.
Yeah, well, you can't like everything in your training program.
Okay, I did it again, didn't I? But yeah, I agree with you from that point of view. And I guess at the end of the day, one thing that we've developed is a strong engagement at our level in terms of building. Even this podcast is part of our engagement process. We're learning, we deep dive, we talk about it all the time. and we're passionate about it. And this helps us in terms of driving us to do the things that we need to do in the way. And we're going, oh, we didn't think of this. Goodness me, Bryan mentioned X in his book, and we haven't thought about that. And if we do that in every book we read, we extract, one more piece, and we're trying to make it into an arrow to push it and give us momentum.
Yeah.
And that's brilliant. And what I would say is that's great for us because we're doing what we're doing. But I'm thinking about our listeners a little bit, and providing they've listened to it this long, haven't got too bored with us. But what I would say is, to our listeners who are maybe they don't have that amount of time, they're not so engaged. I mean, I would say pick up the book. It's an easy read and very clearly laid out, and you could identify maybe something that would speak stronger to you. If there are 11 principles in the book, they're clearly laid out, and you could dip into one maybe where you go, oh yes, I hadn't thought of that. That would be my advice to them. But what advice would you have for our listeners in terms of, where should they get started with improvement or identifying issues for themselves?
I would say, if I start with the assumption that if they're going to start with my book as a resource, right? Which they don't have to. I mean, honestly, the simplest way that I would say, ignoring my book, as my book is one of many ways to get more engaged in your training. And getting engaged in your training is probably one of the core ideas that we haven't talked about too much in this, but it's how much you're mentally, thinking about and putting effort and actions into your training. And I think of engagement as like kind of the combination of your motivation and your passion. And your motivation is your motivation to achieve a goal, and your passion is just how much you enjoy doing it. And if you're sort of struggling and you want to get a little more out of your training, find little ways to be more engaged. And like you guys are fantastic because you guys are so engaged. You're reading the books, you're applying the books, you're doing a podcast, you're training together. You have mastered this piece as far as I can tell from the outside, right? Like the engagement piece. You're fully, and it's harder for other people to do that because of whatever the reasons are, families and work and all this stuff. But you can find little ways, and sometimes it's as simple as reading a book. So this is my plug. If you read my book, it is fairly simple, I hope, and it's laid out clearly. And you called it a buffet in the beginning. I like that because I know that nobody's going to read my book and read every chapter and get like an epiphany out of every chapter. Like some of the chapters I'm sure you guys read and you were like, yeah, that makes total sense. That's how I think about it today. Like that's it. Right. Maybe I hopefully gave it a little bit of context or an anecdote to that is useful or enjoyable. But at the same time, some of it is clear already for many people. But I found that everybody who's read it has come back to me with one or two, let's say, some of the ideas, and they say, like I never thought about that way, and that makes me think differently about whatever the problem that they're facing. And I like that idea, and it fits with how I think about reading books anyway. You guys have your own strategies, I'm sure, for reading, but I think you can choose to read books for enjoyment, or you can choose to read books to get something out of them and try to get better. And I tend to read books where I want to get something out of them. So when I read the book, I think to myself, I'm going to read this book and try to take 2 or 3 things. And actionable things. Like I'm going to actually change my behavior as a result of reading this book in 2 or 3 ways, probably small, because I generally believe small changes are better than big changes. And that's how my strategy for how I read the book is I read it and I try to just find something small to change as a result. And those are like, I guess I say, if you're reading my book, start off, you can look at the chapters, see what they're about, and you can decide, I'm going to read this one. Seems interesting. A chapter on self-efficacy. I'm going to deep dive on this after hearing us talk about it and try to understand that a little bit better. Or the hidden training program, something like that. And then when you apply a little bit of that, just the act of reading the book will make you be more engaged. That's what reading the book is. It's engaged a little bit more at a little different level. Now go take those ideas and talk about them with someone. Go on your run. Like, let's talk about this a little bit. Let's get them some examples from them. All these little things you can do. They're really small, but they start to make a difference. And the more you do them, the easier it becomes to do a little more. And the more the easier it is to do a little more. And if you can make small improvements in your quality, like the quality of the work you're doing, the quality of the way you're thinking about your training, the quality of your lifestyle that you're living around your training, you're not going to see the benefits tomorrow. You're not going to see the benefits in a week. But if you stick with it for a while, you might find yourself suddenly making a leap and you don't even feel like you did that much different. Just sort of made some small tweaks that you were really consistent about over time. And I think that's a very possible result for a lot of people. It's making a number of small changes and being consistent about it. It can actually lead to a surprising amount of improvement. So that's what I would encourage people to do is engage a little more in ways that are easy to do, but that motivate you or that it fuel your passion for what you're doing.
Since we've been, reading all these books, I mean, I already liked to read about running, but yeah, I find that every book, sometimes it's just that they give you that reminder of things that you've been told before or that, you've kind of read elsewhere. But sometimes, yeah, it's just that each book has that one or two. And sometimes even if it's not an informational book like this one was, but it's like a memoir, let's say, which is more like a story. But sometimes you still get something out of that because, it'll inspire you. So you'll be more motivated to go do your training, and that might last for a couple of weeks. And then, then you'll be on to something else. But like for the duration of the time that motivation lasted, I mean, you got, some good, solid training miles out of it. So yeah, I like that way of thinking about the book.
One of the things that we do is every 10 or so podcasts, we actually do a summary podcast where we go, okay, so what are the 2 or 3 things that we learned from, or observations or learnings from each book? And we just go down the list. So if anybody's listening to the podcast and they go, oh, do I have to listen to all of that stuff to get, 1 or 2 learnings? No, you don't. Just go to the, what is it? The throwback, I think we call them, the throwback episodes, the summary podcast episodes, and just get the cliff notes on the learnings.
The disclaimer is that they're our learnings, and so maybe they're not the things that other people would benefit from. So there is that.
No, but that's okay. It gives them a different way of engaging of learning from your engagement in the books. Like you guys are doing this work to engage in it in a very direct way and then share that, right? So you're creating this opportunity for me, and you're creating an opportunity for your listeners to sort of get a little bit of exposure to the ideas in the book in a way that makes sense. Maybe they're on a long run right now and they're plugging away and they're still running because we're still talking and they want to finish the episode. So, congratulations on your new distance PR. We've been talking for a while now. And, the thing is, I really believe that what you guys are doing is fantastic, as I said in the beginning, partly as a platform for people like me who are trying to get word about my book out there, and more importantly than the book, like the ideas in the book is what I really want to share, right? But I think that everybody out there, I think the reminder that little bits of effort, little bits of strategic effort can really create outsized results. Like if you go and pick up a memoir that you are interested in reading just because it looks like a good memoir, you have an attitude of, I'm going to take something from this and I'm going to change my behavior as a result of reading this. And you commit yourself to doing that little activity, that reading that book you might find that it absolutely unlocks something in you. And it's sort of approaching the book with the mindset that's possible, right? Because if you approach the book with the mindset, I'm just going to read it and whatever. Okay, that's fine, but you may not get something out of it. And I believe very strongly in the power of small changes over time. I guess I'll say, like, one of the things that's not in the book, but I did this talk, and I had to come up with a presentation, and I came up with this framework that I really liked, and I was like, oh, I wish I did this in the book, but it's it's like after the fact, after you published it. When I was talking about feedback loops and how leaps happen, and I said, well, here's the thing. You've got 3 key things as a runner. You've got the quality of your work. You've got how you recover after that in order to show up the next day and be ready to run again. And then you've got your consistency and how many times can you repeat the cycle of doing good work and recovering so that the benefits you got from that work are still present with you when you show up the next day. Quality, recovery, and consistency. If you can find someone to improve any of those 3, you have a chance to make a leap in the future, because any of those 3 can get these like small gains that build over time. And when you put it that way, it's like, well, there's always ways to improve our quality of what we're doing. And there's probably always ways to recover a little bit better. And there's always little ways to get yourself to be more consistent. So to me, it simplifies the challenge, and it also frees you to focus where it makes sense for you. Like if you, I don't know, like wherever you're motivated to make that change, like you said, Alan, you're not motivated about diet, right? Like that's fine. You find some little simple changes to make the diet, and you want to put your effort into the actual training plan, or you want to put your effort into sleeping better, or you want to put your effort into some other aspect of your life. Like any change in quality, recovery, or consistency has the potential to create outsized benefits for you if you can maintain it. Pick the one that makes the most sense for you, and put a little effort there. And I feel like that's a challenge that we can all sort of embrace. I don't know. It makes it feel smaller to me.
Yeah, I thought that's a good last thought for everybody. So just because we should probably wrap it up so that you can continue your day, because it is going to be time for your kids to
Where's
wake
the
up.
best place that people can get a copy of your book, or where would you like people to go to get a copy of your book, Bryan, if they want one?
So right now it's only available at my website, which is maketheleapbook.com. I have some social feeds that I've been sort of trying to learn how to be somebody on social media. So, Facebook, you can find me, Instagram at Make the Leap Book. I kind of have a Twitter, but I started it, but I'm not as active there. I think Instagram is where I'm thinking a little more, but you can follow me in some of those places. I have a newsletter that I publish weekly, which is sometimes it's related to the topics in the book. Sometimes it's related. It's all about thinking better about what we're doing in training in life. And that comes out once a week. The website's a good place to go though. Maketheleapbook.com. That'll have everything there. If people listen and they want to connect with me, like and especially if you read the book and have any thoughts about it, or want to share stories about what, how these ideas have affected you, by all means, like I would love to engage with anybody who listens to it and learn from you guys as well, because it's been a journey for me writing it, and the feedback I get from it is just like amazing. It's the cool part about having a book out there is somebody writing to you to tell you that they read it and liked it and got something from it. So the more the better for me.
Well, on that note, maybe Alan, you can kind of recap what you got out of the book.
Well, first of all, people should understand that this is a mindset book that leads you to the behaviors that you need to improve. I think it's pretty powerful, as I said at the start. And I would also reiterate something that you said during the book, Bryan, which is you become what you think about most. So it puts you into a mindset to think about the thing that you want to become. The book's very clearly laid out. It has little diagrams and tables, which I love to explain concepts. A picture is worth 1,000 words. A difficult concept on momentum. What's momentum? Suddenly you just drop us a diagram and we all understand it perfectly. Things like the take-home points at the end of each chapter are fantastic in terms of revisiting the principles and the key messages of each one. And you actually list out also the 11 principles at the end as a summary. And you actually do a summary chapter, which is really neat in terms of just bringing us back to everything, because the whole thing is a package at the end of the day. Talking about the package, maybe it's because you're in Japan, but the book is a beautiful little package, I think, much in the way that Japanese culture values the presentation. The book as an item is Japanese in that, in the essential sort of quality of it, which is kind of cool. All the things you talk about are well supported. So, people like author Matt Fitzgerald, Hall of Fame coach Bob Larson, Olympic marathon Meb Keflezighi, are all advocates of the things that you're saying here, which, if people think, oh, I'm not sure I believe all this stuff that they're talking about, well, these people would say otherwise. If you want to go further, I see that there's a companion workbook. I haven't got that far, but I saw your reference to a workbook, so you can actually do some active learning.
Can I just comment about the workbook really quickly, because I didn't mention it? Very simple. I really designed it with teams in mind when I did it, where a coach could have the athletes have the workbook. They read the book. And the way the workbook is structured is each chapter in the book is maybe 12 to 15 pages, but I have a 1-page summary with the key ideas from the chapter, and then 5 or 6 thoughtful questions to sort of try to apply those ideas to your specific situation, whatever it is that you're training to do. It's if you want to engage more, it's a simple way to try to engage a little bit more with the material in my book in order to apply it to how you're training.
I think whether you're, as I said, whether you're an absolute beginner or a professional trying to win an Olympic gold medal, there's something in the book that you could take and apply to make yourself a little bit better. So if you're thinking this book's not for me, it is. It's just your mindset that's wrong. You're not looking at the book properly. Over to you, Liz.
So I guess I'm going to reiterate some of the things that you mentioned. Like, I like the form factor. It's a small book. It's pretty thin, so you can kind of slide it in a bag, in a gym bag, in a purse for reading on the bus, or you can carry it around to races. It's not too heavy. It's got a lot of big, bold quotes inside, which are really fun because you can kind of open it up before a race if you're feeling kind of stressed, and you could just read some of them and they could inspire you, which is a little bit what I found. Sometimes if I was reading a chapter and then I just flipped back a few pages and I saw one of those big bold quotes, kind of reminded me what was in that section of the chapter. So it's really great. Like Alan said, plenty of little diagrams to explain the theory behind the concepts. And I like that you explained the theory behind the concepts, even though, you didn't go into depth and make each chapter, 50 pages or anything, but you did kind of say that it, the idea comes from somewhere where it comes from. And I guess people can decide to follow up on it more. Like, I still need to read the Carol Dweck book. So that kind of reminded me of that on mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And the little takeaways at the end of each chapter were fantastic because, again, it kind of reminded you what the chapter was about. So the LEAP idea is based on sound theories. And if you've been a runner for several years, then when you kind of look back at your own progress, you can see that your progress probably increased in leaps, just like the graph in the book sort of shows visually. So it's not like an idea that you can't relate with in the end. And I guess I learned a few things about my own thinking, so that was useful. I do have some things to work on. I kind of looked back to sort of things I used to do before during my time running, and how I used to get very nervous before races and then try not to care so that I wouldn't be disappointed with the result. And I realized that this book would have been perfect back then, because I would have noticed or hopefully realized that it's, this is not a very effective way to think. Yes. Thank you for writing this book.
Well, thank you guys for having me on as a platform. I'm so glad that it resonates with you and what you guys are trying to do right now. Because to be honest, they say sit down and who's your ideal reader. And I sat down and I said, a 20-year-old me, that's what I want to. That's who I'm going to write to. It's like somebody who's just graduating high school or entering college. How are they going to get the most out of themselves? That's who I'm going to aim for. But it's very rewarding to see that I have readers who are doing what you guys are doing, which is chasing a 3-hour marathon, and you're doing this stuff, and that it resonates. And so I will just finish by saying, the fact that you guys took the time to read it, that you took the time to put so much thought into, and to have me on to have this discussion, it means a lot to me. And I'm very appreciative of it, of you giving me the opportunity to be here and speak with you about it.
The pleasure's all ours, Bryan. Well, in fact, the pleasure's partially ours and partially the pleasure of our listeners. Because thanks to you, we have a little gift for our listeners who stayed with us right to the end of this podcast. And that's a 20% discount if they order the book from your website. The code that they have to use is code Alan and Liz, all in capitals with no spaces. Basically, they can go to the website, which is https://maketheleapbook.com/discount/Alan and Liz. We'll put all the details of that in our notes for the podcast. Thank you for listening to another episode of Running Book Reviews. A big thank you to Bryan for providing us with review copies of the book, Make the Leap, and for spending time with us today. If you'd like to leave us feedback about how we can improve the podcast, or want to suggest a book that you'd like us to review in the future, please leave us a comment on social media. We are Running Book Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter we are reviews_running. Please also follow us on social media, find out about new episodes when they're released, or you can just subscribe to the podcast on your favorite streaming platform. That's all for this episode of Running Book Reviews.
Bye for now.